Hello and welcome to the Women Creating Wealth 10K in 10 Days Challenge. We hope you will enjoy this exclusive content that we've created with you in mind. And we hope that it might help shift your own money consciousness, money stories, and your thoughts around what just might be possible for you. So we invite you to come along, and if you would like to help us with our own 10K in 10 Days challenge, we would love if you would shop amongst our services and our products. We have memberships for enjoying family photo sessions and family art. Every once in a while, we have a few mini session events that are available to the public, and we have a beautiful guided self-love meditation and a gorgeous, warming, comfy chamomile and cinnamon tea that you can pair with your self-love meditation. So enjoy having a look around, enjoy shopping and treating yourself, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
So hi everyone, this is Ariana from Well Fed Photography. If you're familiar with our podcast, Living a Life Well Fed, then you may have come across some amazing interviews already, but this is something that is completely different. This is all about women creating wealth, and so I've got special guests on for a number of days for you to talk specifically around wealth, women creating wealth, and why it is so important. And today I have Jessie Shedden with us, who has such an incredible story. She actually led a cult. She loves her chickens. She's written a memoir and a follow-up to her memoir. And actually, Jessie, if you just want to talk a bit about yourself and your experiences, I think you might even be able to do a better introduction to tell people just who you are and how you've gotten to this point in your life so far.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for the intro. It's great to be here. I grew up in a strict religious cult. It goes back multi-generations of our family being in it, so I've never known any different. And then, and I do apologize if you can hear my chickens in the background, but they're trying to put their bit in. And then I escaped in December 2017. And I've been kind of rebuilding my life from there. To give a very small background of what the cult entailed, women specifically weren't allowed to wear makeup, jewelry, trousers, jeans, pants, whatever you call them. They were not allowed to own businesses, have responsible positions. They came out of education with no higher education, much like the boys did as well. But then it was a very short period of time, and they would get married off, pretty much arranged marriages, and they were then homemakers and baby production factories, and that was their lot in life. And I knew from pretty early on that was absolutely not what I wanted, until I had to do something to change that trajectory of my life.
Yes. And so was there one main moment that created that shift for you to be able to leave, or was it a culmination of lots of little things that happened?
I think it was a culmination and then a final nail in the coffin, as it were. So from the age of 8, I knew that I was different. I'd always been bullied. And then when I got to 16, I was like, I don't ever feel like I'm going to end up in a relationship with anybody in here. And sadly, around the same time, I ended up getting sexually abused by somebody outside of the cult. And then at 18, I did end up in a relationship with someone outside of it, even though we weren't supposed to, and it's contraband. That all got squashed, and I was then put under house arrest. And I had tried to leave at that point, and then I didn't, I tried to be a good girl for the next 8 years, and it was just, I was just dying inside. The more I tried to conform, the more I was being suppressed and shutting down. And then my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and it was like, she's only 66. You don't know how long you've got left in life. Nobody expected this. I mean, you never expect cancer, but we'd always planned that she would probably outlive my father. She was the one made of cast iron, and he was the one who was laid up in bed as soon as he sneezed. And it was just like, we just never planned for it. And it was such a shock. It was like, Jessie, you have to wake up. You're not happy where you are. And the more I looked forward, I didn't want a relationship with anybody in there. I wasn't allowed to own a business in there. I wasn't allowed to have my own home unless I was in a relationship. So I couldn't move out of my parents, and I'm now 30 and I'm still under house arrest. I'm still being monitored for every moment of my time. All I could see was just a big concrete wall in front of me when I looked into the future, and it's like, I have to decide between suicide or a chance at a new life. And at least if I try the chance, I can always commit suicide later down the line if I don't like it. But I can't the other way around.
Yes. And so when you're leaving, I mean, we are talking about wealth creation here, and part of that is having money. And so if you are leaving everything you've ever known, including a place to stay, what does that look like financially for you?
I was in a very fortunate position because I'd always worked for family businesses, and because I hadn't really had any overheads up until then, I'd been able to save really well. So I actually came out liquid and I had 100K in my bank account. But that meant I could know that I had that safety net. And one of the first things I did when I came out was I had to find a property that I knew mentally I would be happy to live in. And if I hadn't have had that wealth, I would have ended up in a hole somewhere and my mental health would have just gone down the drain.
Right.
And I'd been used to living in luxury. Like my parents' place was 2/3 of an acre, 6 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. You know, we had all had walk-in robes. It was beautiful for England, and it was definitely middle class, upper maybe. If I had to come out and go to a woman's refuge, you can bet the healing process would have been a lot longer.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, with the religious cult, was it something that people on the outside knew about, or were you kind of functioning like you were normal members of society, and then behind the scenes it was known that you were a part of this cult? Or how did that operate?
I think a lot of people don't realize it's around. I mean, they're in Ireland, they're here in South Wales, they're all over the globe. You'd be at the supermarket right beside them, you'd be at the fuel station right beside them. You're not going to meet them at your hairdressers probably, because they're not allowed to cut their hair, and you probably won't see them if you go, you know, on an all-inclusive holiday, because they're not allowed to do that either. But for the most part, they tend to blend in unless you know what you're looking for. And I think some of those who traded with them, and maybe some neighbours, did start to pick up on things, particularly when children were at normal schools. There's a lot of things we weren't allowed to do, which included socialising and going over to their friends' houses. That kind of thing made it quite obvious. But then they've transitioned now and they have their own schools. So nobody gets to see it because, again, it's away from the public eye.
How did you feel you were most influenced when it comes to wealth? Because I know you said you left with 100K, but you also mentioned things like not being able to have your own business or your own property. So was there a healing process that had to happen to where you felt comfortable to have those things or start those things?
I always wanted them. I always wanted my own business. My father's a serial entrepreneur, and even working for him, I was always doing my own stuff on the side. Before I left, I'd had 2 jobs, one actually in my mother's business, which was a real rarity that she even had one, and one for my sister, and we were doing a real small thing. It was always put down, but actually they paid quite well, and we used to try and keep them under the radar. So no, business has always been in my blood. I've really wanted that from day dot. Feeling worthy of it was another whole thing.
Yeah. And so how have things, did you say it was 2017 when you left?
Yeah.
So how has your life changed in that interim, if you were to just even give a few highlights of the changes you've been through?
Huge. If we're talking, for instance, if we go down the business route, I don't know if you're familiar with the sacred money archetypes, but I'm an accumulator first of all. So I'm sitting there with 100K in my bank account and I'm thinking, I have to get a job. You know, I'm going to die if I don't, which is ridiculous because I was in such a fortunate position. But I went out and I worked for a doctor's reception and it was horrific, you know, for me, because I was going through the loss of my mother at the time, who was passing away. I had some kind of a weird affair going on that was very traumatic in its own way. I was getting to know the world in a completely different view, and I was in a reception role where I carried really no authority. I was very overskilled for it, and I was used to having responsibility, and I was also used to being we had a very high level of honesty in the cult as well. So bending truths didn't really work for me very well. And I very quickly became round peg, square hole, and I hated having line managers and things because I just wasn't used to that structure. And so I came out of that very quickly, and it actually did result in discrimination. So they had to be quite careful. And then I started looking for opportunities. I was like, never, ever in my life will I work under anybody ever again. I just, having been so repressed, not just in business, but generally, it was like, I cannot go there again, mental health wise. And so I got into MLM, first of all, which again was a very cult-like experience. And again, I was like, this does not fit well with me. Things are not adding up. I cannot sell with a clear conscience to people. I have to get out of this. And then and in the background, I'm doing all of this healing and finding out what the world's actually about and trying to learn life skills and having a series of pretty shitty relationships at the same time. Again, low self-esteem. And I ended up doing modeling for a year, which was fun. There's a lot of ups and downs with it. Originally, I got into that, again, quite by mistake, because I went for a photo shoot. I'd been, as I told you, bullied. A lot of it was my appearance. You're never going to catch anybody's eye. You're never going to end up with anyone hot. And I got into it and I started getting the compliments. And I was like, oh, I like this. This feels good. I'm getting the external validation that I've never had. I've never heard this stuff before. And so it was kind of addictive. And I started doing more and more shoots. And then I started noticing the types of people that were complimenting me and the stuff that was turning up in my inbox. And the fact that I was having infatuations from 74-year-olds and I was having, 63 messages in a day from a reporter. And I was like, this is actually not doing my self-esteem any good at all. So the external side is the ego's being really stroked, but then I've also got the damage. Mm-hmm. And there were photographers who wanted things purely for their lookbooks, not because it actually created art. There was a lot of very black, murky stuff going on. And I decided I needed to come out of that too. That was not a route I wanted to go down because my self-esteem was just being eroded all over again, which wasn't what I needed to do. Yeah. And it's taken time. Just as towards the end of that, I started hosting modeling events because I swear and still do that absolutely anybody can model. It wasn't because I was some particular size or shape or anything like that. I'm short, I'm certainly not blonde, and I'm not a size 6. So if I can do it, anybody else should be able to do it too. And I was having a lot of friends saying, how are you getting all these pictures? And I was like, well, let me show you. And so I started hosting what I called Real Women Framed events, which were for women strictly who'd had absolutely zero modeling experience. And I brought together photographers, professional hairstylists, makeup artists, and obviously a bunch of model women, real women. And it was just incredible to watch them go into that with so little confidence and then end up feeling and looking like $1 million in front of the camera and coming out the other side just with so much confidence. And that was really fulfilling. And just around the time that COVID kicked off last year, I began to see that bell curve that I had been going through, and I started to see them being taken advantage of. And I was like, oh no, I have to stop this because this is not working out well either. I can't put them through what I know I went through. They're unsuspecting. They're having photographers jumping all over to work with them and not for the right reasons.
Yes.
And so I stepped back and I was like, I want to do those events again because they were amazing. Like we had themed events, we had Pinup 1950s, we had Rosie the Riveter, we had Call the Midwife. We had some really fun themes going on, but it was, I have to work on this for them internally first before we get to the other side because I can't set them up for failure like that.
Well, and I think one of the interesting things that happens when you're on a healing journey, and let's be honest, we're always healing at some level, or we're always expressing something that needs healed at some level along the way. But to me, one of the interesting things is when you get to the point that you can understand that some of the things that you're experiencing in your present are the old energy patterns falling away, and that you have the choice to create new things. So it's interesting how even when you're healing and you're making those shifts, some of the old things show up, but it's just that falling away. That's my perspective of it anyway. I don't know if you feel differently, but it just takes time for it to all wash out and wash away.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And I've seen that even just in the last few days. It's just, it's very interesting. And it's like the universe comes up and goes, here's your ex. Are you going to be stupid enough to take him back? It's just like that test. Like, what are you going to do with this now?
Yes. And what do you feel like? I mean, you've been on this journey, you've been through this healing, you've had a few different entrepreneurial things that have come up. And I'm wondering, was the writing a theme that was always there for you? Or, I mean, I know that writing is very big for you. So is that something that happened during the pandemic or?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I've published a book before that, which was nothing about me. It was a previous business. But just as the pandemic kicked off, I was for the first time, in a really good relationship. And actually, since escaping a safe place for the first time where I wasn't fighting for my survival. And I realized I could finally go back and lift the lid on Pandora's box, because I'd never talked about my past ever. And I didn't want to. My whole mantra coming out was, I will never go there again. I don't want to look at it again. I just want a happy life. And I know people that have left who 40 years later are still very bitter and angry about it and live very much in that pain. And that was not a place, if I wanted to feel like that, I may as well have stayed there. So it was like, that wasn't what I came out for. And being in that safe place, I was like, okay, I can start to look at this now. And I was petrified to talk about it. I was like, everybody that I say any about, that I grew up in a cult to, is going to look at me like I have 3 heads and I will never see them again. That fear of being judged was so high. It was like, I'm just going to lose any kind of friendship I've built up. And I wasn't ready to do it. And then I was like, people are curious about this and I'm ready to go there. I know I have someone now who has my back, regardless of what people think about me.
Yes.
And going through that journey it was just so healing. It was hugely healing. It was like, I finally get to let go of this, let it out, stop bottling it up. And I can actually let this out. And I don't have to hide any of it anymore. And I can conclude that chapter, although it will never be like fully smoothly healed. I can conclude it and go, okay, I'm done with that. I can let go of a lot of that now and I can move forward. And it's just been phenomenal. And I think that process is more important to me than the writing. It's the being able to own and vocalize your story and share your story in whatever format it is, spoken or written or any other method, and just being able to let go of it and heal from it by being seen, heard and understood, which is what happens when you start speaking, is that actually these people started popping up and going, wow, what you've been through is amazing. You're so brave. And I was like, really? Like, nobody's ever told me that before, because I've never spoken about it before. So no one knows. It's like, do you mean that was actually a big thing? I genuinely didn't think it was a big thing. It's just something I had to do. You just got on with it. And then you start being seen, and it's like, it gives you that place to heal and to acknowledge what you've actually been through. And then the reason I have my sequel now is because after I'd written and released that one, boy, did that open up room for a whole bunch of stuff to happen that couldn't happen before, because I hadn't actually processed the first part. And it was just like, now, in 8 months after releasing the first one, I have another whole book to write. And I've just written the first one about the first 30 years of my life. That was how boring it was out there. And now everything's just gone technicolored, and it continues. It's like, okay, Jessie, you're going to be bringing these out quicker because so much more is happening. And it's just like, just keep talking. You need to just keep speaking about this and sharing the stuff that's happening.
I was going to ask if it influenced your, be able to go through the healing, be able to actually bring it up, write about it, talk about it, share your story and release it in a certain way. Has that influenced you financially, positively or negatively throughout the process?
I think long-term, positively. Initially, when you are a relatively unknown person and you're releasing a written work into the world, and you're looking at it, most of these don't sell for much over £10 if they do. That's not a great shake to the amount you've put into it, the time you've put into it, the hours, editors, formatters, all the rest that you're paying for. So financially, no, there's not a huge big bucks off actually putting a book into the world.
Yeah.
But it's all the other stuff that comes off the side shoots of it. So things like talking to you now, it's things like being in countless magazines, newspapers, TV. And then you've got, actually, now I know who I am, what do I want to do with this? And you start making so many connections that you never had before. And those connections take you to some pretty amazing places. And it's allowed me to see what is it that really fires me up with a passion that makes me, that I want to help put out into the world. And it's like, well, that was what came from that. It was like, women particularly are not sharing their stories enough. They're not speaking up. I've just been watching a video on a supermodel that worked for Victoria's Secret, who is now speaking up about how bad things were in there. But that doesn't happen enough.
Yeah.
And we really badly need to.
But I'm actually doing a book of breastfeeding stories right now from individuals around Ireland. And it has been amazing to see those women go through the process of telling their stories. And even some stories where they didn't realize there was healing or trauma to actually process and release. until they actually told it. It was like, it's been so incredible to see them go through that process and get to the other side and feel that weight lifted off of them. So it's been very amazing for me to be able to see that and to be able to help provide a space for that to happen. So I can definitely identify with some of the things that you've said there.
It does feel very special to hold that sacredness for them for the first time, to tiptoe out and to share something they've hidden away, or haven't spoken about, and to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, now people have a better sense of who you are, the things you've experienced and where you are now. And one of the things that I admire about you, Jessie, is that you understand, or you seem to have come to an understanding, that wealth and what it looks like can be whatever the individual wants it to be. Instead of stilettos, maybe you want some gorgeous hand-designed leather boots or something like that. So could you speak about that process too, and maybe looking different than the typical stereotypical idea we have of a wealthy woman in our minds?
Yeah, so again, I think kind of tied in with leaving or escaping and releasing my story was like this whole, who am I? What's right for me? What feels aligned for me? And growing up, it had been very much around, people with wealth had extremely large houses, they had expensive, fast cars, and none of that really sat for me. I was somebody that turned up at classic car meets, and I wanted, that 1950s Chevy Bel Air or whatever it was. That was, and believe me, they also take money to love, because you got to find the custom parts and what have you. So, and it's like leaning into that and going, I don't have to be the person that just wants a Ferrari because I happen to have a lot of money. And it's one of the funniest experiences for me, and I think I always remember this, is I went from being broke in December to having my first ever 36k week in March, like literally 3 months later, completely out of the blue. And that night, I just remember being so happy about it and feeling so secure in having the money that when we went out for a quick drive in the evening, we went into a local supermarket, and we hadn't intended to do that. So I was walking around that supermarket in my slippers. And I started chuckling to myself, because I had always thought it was so scummy and poor to even go outside your back gate or your front gate in slippers. I mean, crying out loud, who does that? And here I am. And I was like, but I'm probably got more cash in my bank right now than anybody in this supermarket. And nobody knows that. So why have I always attached a look to wealth?
Yes. Absolutely. I remember seeing an interview with, I think it was Jeff Bezos, and he was driving this very old broken down Honda, and the interviewer was like, what's with the Honda? Like, what, you've got all of this money, why are you? And he's like, it's a perfectly good car. Like, he just didn't care. It didn't light him up to have something else. Maybe that's changed now, but but I remember watching that and thinking, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You never really know what's happening behind the scenes for someone financially, because equally someone could look so rich on the outside and have nothing financially, money wise, in the bank account. So
just a lot of red figures.
Yeah. So I'm interested to hear from you, any main shifts that have happened for you around wealth, that, moments where something clicked for you or shifted within you that really changed your perspective.
I think we spoke about worth before, and I think that's a huge one. And I think that's probably been my biggest, is stepping into that place that I'm worthy of this.
Yes.
And when you don't feel that, you're automatically repelling it, whether you like it or not. And worth for me has been a huge one. I remember in December realizing that I most likely had PTSD after everything that happened, and reached out to the local council for some support and help. Probably not the best place to go, but at the time, again, I was broke. And when they finally did call me, there was like, what? I said, I've done a lot of work actually around my self-worth. And they were saying, what was the one thing? I said, actually, around money, I'm believing that I'm worthy of charging for my services. That's the final piece that hadn't fallen into place for me. And it was realizing that was what was keeping it away. It's like actually having to lean into that before it starts to show up. And then the second piece is just like, we make it so bloody hard for ourselves. We make it so hard for ourselves. We think we have to provide the world for rock bottom prices, and it's like, we do not. People don't actually need all the bells and whistles. You don't have to have the longest program out there or whatever it is.
Yes.
When you could simply provide all they're asking for, and sometimes that's just your time, and they just want to hear what you have to say on a subject, or something really simple that comes to you super easily, but you are trying to overcomplicate it.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest blocks, is the fact that we feel like things have to be complicated or very intricately detailed, and actually sometimes the simplest is the best way to go, you know? So I love that. I have talked to a few other people, and I talked about charitable giving and giving back being an aspect of wealth. So are there things that are near and dear to your heart when it comes to charitable giving?
So that's very interesting, because the word charitable for me still has triggers.
Okay.
Back there, we were forced to give to charity, whether we liked it or not, whether we had it or not. It was just, there was no real feeling into it.
Yes.
And also there's some quite questionable charitable activities they do as well. But one of the funnest things for me has been this thing that's starting to catch on, where it's kind of like random acts of kindness, where you might, I don't know, we were in a market stall not that long ago, we were talking to the guy who was running it, and he had all these custom soaps, and they were amazing. They're from all over the world, every kind of animal under the sun. And I don't really use bar soap a lot, and we spent quite a long time talking to him. Nobody else really was around him, and we walked off and we talked between ourselves, and we said, you know, I didn't feel right just walking away from him. And we went back and we bought a couple of gifts for others, and I remember they came to like less than £10 or something. I gave him a £20 note, and he was like, oh, hang on a minute. I said, no. And the look on his face was just like, what?
Yes.
Like, who pays me twice what these are priced at? And that feeling was just like amazing. It was like, I can do that, and I can just walk away. It doesn't have to be big, but the difference is made to that person. And then a couple of minutes around the corner, we popped into a cafe, and they had a board up where you can leave favors. And it's like, okay, yeah, definitely going to put a coffee and cake on that board for whoever happens to come by and needs one.
Yeah.
And again, the gratitude, and it's like, that didn't even cost a lot, but it meant so much. And that felt so different to going, oh yeah, UNICEF, £2.50 a month, or, you know, whatever it might be. It's just, you got that immediate response of like, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to keep doing.
I love that. And actually, Amanda Francis talks about that in her book, Rich as Fuck, More Money Than You Know What to Do With. She talks about giving and how some people are raised with that expectation that you just have to give 10%, but there, like you said, there's no feeling associated with it. So she mentions about how find something that connects and feels good to you. You know, it's all about the energetics of it. And if it's not lighting you up, it's probably not lighting in the other end up either. So yeah, I'm so interested to hear your perspective, and I love that. And one of my favorite ways to give back as well is to support other businesses. It feels so good. Like you said, even if it's buying bars of soap or honey or something, it just feels amazing to do that. So
absolutely. I know a couple of my recent monthly subscriptions have come from really small women-owned businesses, and it's like, you know, you've made a difference to them.
Yes. Absolutely. On that subject, because we are all about supporting other women in business, are there female entrepreneurs or women-owned businesses that have impacted your life greatly that you would like to recognize?
Yes. The three biggest that I can think of off the top of my head are Denise Duffield-Thomas and Her Money Bootcamp.
Yes.
That was absolutely the starting point for me, and it's been phenomenal. Really, the community, the osmosis in the community, as opposed to actually doing the work. I did do the work religiously, but it was actually the osmosis over the last 18 months that's just been incredible. And then out of that, yeah, there's been a wealth. So Salira, I don't know if you're familiar with her, incredible. So much, she's brought so much fun into my world, and just blown open my restricted thinking in ways I could never have imagined. So yes, 100% her. Followed by Gabby Abrahams, who has just been a tonic. And I'm not known for repeatedly buying off the same people, but with Gabby, it's kind of addictive. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just been amazing. And she's one of those that I've loved seeing her grow as well.
Yeah.
It's not just what I get out of it, it's seeing what she gets out of it. And that's just been amazing. And I've never really clicked with any coach as well as I've clicked with Gabby. And it's so much fun and lightness in it. It's not the heavy work. I mean, it is heavy, but she gets the vibrant side to it as well. And then on top of that, Rebecca Lima she's been amazing for half-assing stuff, minimal viable awesomeness. And it's like, yes, I'm all about that. You know, why are we putting more in than we need to? Not in any way to sound cheapskatey, but it's just we overdo it. Imposter syndrome comes along and goes, nah, that's not good enough. And she's been amazing for that.
That's wonderful. And we actually have a chat with Solera. I just recorded an interview with her, so that'll be going up. I'll be chatting with Gabby later in the week as well. So, and Gabby actually recommended Rebecca to me, so I'm going to have to get in touch with her too.
Oh, she's incredible.
Well, do you have any last words to share about your journey or about why it's important for women to have their own wealth and independence, or anything to share?
Oh, in terms of important for them to have their wealth, well, from where I've been, I see, and one of the reasons I didn't want to get into a relationship there is once I got into it, I'd have no money to call my own. So once you're oppressed, you need money to be able to get out and lead a better life. And I've seen married women try and leave and have absolutely nothing, even struggle to put away, you know, £100 secretly so that they could leave. So in terms of needing it, I think there's a lot of bad energy around the word profit, and it is so uncalled for that, you know, we have to live, and we deserve to live on more than a basic.
Yes. Just
for starters, in terms of when it comes to oppression, to getting on to that better life that most of us desire.
Yes, absolutely. If people want to get in touch with you to learn more, purchase your books, maybe work with you, where can they get in touch with you?
Both of my books, excuse me, are available from jessieshedden.com/books. And I am available on Facebook under Jessie Shedden as well.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, and the very best wishes for you and for your business and any other books that you may go on to write as well. And all your chickens too.